Chapter 941, A Battle Full of Tricks. The Blackfeather Army's current passageway to the north was through Nanning City, Yunnan City, Guangliao City, and Weibei Pass. The logistics team continued to transport resources along this path. When they were fighting in Weibei Pass, they did not have any grains in storage. The grains in Nanning City had been set on fire and destroyed by Luizhou, while the grains in Yunnan City had been taken away by Lu Shu and the rest. Guangliao City still had some reserves, but it was not enough for the Blackfeather Army's daily consumption. The Blackfeather Army had hoped that they would be able to seize some rations in Weibei Pass, but they realized that this area was very poor. When the Longmang Army had left, they did not have the opportunity to burn or take away the rations. Thus, they were only left with a small amount of rations. The leader of the Blackfeather Army was slightly annoyed. It was said that the Longmang Army had obtained army rations, right? Why were they only left with so little? The rations of the Longmang Army had also been taken away by Lu Shu and the rest. If the leader of the Blackfeather Army knew about the truth, he would sigh with emotion. When the Weiwu Army fought, they did not even let their own people off. But to Lu Shu, the people in this world were strangers, while the Weiwu Army was his own people. Others were not considered. Thus, the greatest danger to the Blackfeather Army was that their home ground was not stable. They could not even ensure the smooth transport of their resources. The Weiwu Army was not of much help either. The commander of the Blackfeather Army had people on the grassroots level. Thus, when he started to pay attention to the bets in the palace, he heard that the Songji family were buying large amounts of magical armor. The Songji was a family of aristocrats. They had not fought for many years. Why did they need magical armor now? One did not even have to think to understand that they were working for the Weiwu Army. The Weiwu Army was already strong overall. It was just that they were few in numbers. Now that all of them had magical armor, they were no laughing matter. They could not just give up on Weibei Pass and fight the Weiwu Army to their deaths, right? 100,000 people fighting 5,000 people to the death? It was a waste of manpower, no matter how you thought about it. Another problem was that after the overall strength of the Weiwu Army had increased, not only could they fight, they could also run very quickly. They would run if they were told to run. The Blackfeather Army could not even catch up. Could you believe that they had 4 rank ones to guard their retreat? The leader of the Blackfeather Army had been busy over the past few days adjusting the organization of the troops. He wanted to form a troop that was on par with the Weiwu Army. All along, there was an equal distribution of rank 1s to rank 5s in each troop. All levels of strength were present. But now, it was different. The leader of the Blackfeather Army decided that they could allow a few troops to give up their stronger powers so that they could form a troop that was on par with the Weiwu Army and could catch up to them. But he realized that there were not many strong warriors in the Blackfeather Army. They only had 4 rank 1s and over 2,000 ranks 3s. Even their top powers were no match for the Weiwu Army, and the Weiwu Army had magical armor as well. But no matter what, the leader of the Blackfeather Army realized that the Weiwu Army's high mobility was very important in battles. He waited and hoped that the gambling dens in the palace would place new bets. This way, he would know what the Weiwu Army was planning next and could target them. The leader of the Blackfeather Army sighed with emotion. The Weiwu Army was strange and hard to predict. He had to rely on bets for information. This was the first time the Blackfeather Army used this method of intelligence. If all failed, he would place a bet that the Blackfeather Army would lose. In the worst-case scenario, he would give up his position as the leader of the Blackfeather Army and become a rich man in the palace. As the Blackfeather Army secretly adjusted their organization to ambush the Weiwu Army, the aristocrats in the north region also had a secret discussion. At first, they had wanted to wait and see. They would send soldiers to defeat the Blackfeather Army after the Blackfeather Army headed north to expand their territory and split up their men. After all, if the Black Feather Army wanted to maintain the unimpeded movement of their logistics, they had to take a city and deploy troops to guard that city. Once their line of defense grew longer, the strength of the Black Feather Army would become diluted. They had waited for almost a month, but the Black Feather Army had been delayed at Wei Bei Pass by the Wei Wu Army. Everyone sent their slaves to talk with the Wei Wu Army, but they all failed. If they had repelled the Black Feather Army, it was still fine as the results were positive. But if the Black Feather Army had not been pushed back, they all had the responsibility to not do anything. But if they did not attack, the Wei Wu Army would receive the most credit. When the aristocrats thought about the broken Wei Wu Army monopolizing the rewards, they were somewhat unhappy. Thus, the 7 aristocrats focused on the situation. 3 aristocrats had already had a secret agreement to push the Black Feather Army back. When they saw that the Black Feather Army was helpless against the Wei Wu Army, they started to consider whether the Black Feather Army was not as strong as they had expected. The Black Feather Army was waiting for new bets to be placed in the palace. But before they could wait for the Wei Wu Army, the aristocrats in the North region had made their move. The leader of the Black Feather Army was upset. They could not settle the Wei Wu Army, but now they had to deal with the aristocrats too. Who in the world dared to bully the Black Feather Army? There were many experts from the Lord of Heaven in the Black Feather Army. They would carry out great plans. They were already very frustrated that the troops in the north had been held back by the Wei Wu Army. Did everyone want to bully the Black Feather Army? But he was slightly worried. What if the aristocrats and the Wei Wu Army collaborated with each other? What would they do? There was a new bet in the palace. Will the Wei Wu Army collaborate with the soldiers deployed by the aristocrats in the north region? The leader of the Black Feather Army wanted to use this to determine whether the Wei Wu Army would deploy their forces. But the bets placed on both sides were very low. They did not point to any conclusion. At that moment, a guest came from the Qingxai Army. The leader of the Black Feather Army sat in the central military tent. He looked at the handsome young man in front of him and said calmly, "It's quite interesting that the commander of the Qingxai Army was willing to become a scout for someone else. And now, you dare to come here alone? Tell me. What are you here for?" Lu Yizhao smiled. 1.5 million. This is a very good price. The leader of the Black Feather Army was dumbfounded. What 1.5 million? The next moment, the leader of the Black Feather Army almost exploded with rage. Was he here to trick them? Could the Wei Wu Army fight properly? They played so many tricks in just one battle. Were you done? Huh? But the leader of the Black Feather Army was not an ordinary person. He quickly regained his composure. Now was not the time to be upset. As the leader of an army, he could not allow his emotions to control him. He had to control his emotions. The Wei Wu Army was now very powerful, and the Black Feather Army was helpless against them. Thus, they had to think about how to maximize their benefits. Thus, the leader of the Black Feather Army ordered his men to pass 1.5 million notes to Lu Yizhao. Then, he passed on this information to his friend in the palace and bet 5 million notes that the Wei Wu Army would not deploy their forces. He had bought this in secret. No one knew that the Black Feather Army already had information. The leader of the Black Feather Army felt that he was giving himself a route of escape. Chapter 942, Committed Sins. The leader of the Black Feather Army had spent the last 2 days reflecting. He was here to fight a battle. They had won so many cities, but how did they start gambling in secret? At first, the leader of the Black Feather Army did not believe the Wei Wu Army. But Lu Yizhao's words convinced him. The Wei Wu Army wants to earn big money in the future. If we want to earn big money, we will keep our word. We will definitely not skin the sheep. Do you understand what trust means? Once we have this foundational trust, everyone will be able to collaborate in the future without any worries. The leader of the Black Feather Army thought, had the Weiwu army started to plan their collaboration with them? But this did not form the basis for the Blackfeather army's trust in the Weiwu army. After all, they had worked with the gambling dens and killed so many people. What gave them the right to be trusted? But after the leader of the Blackfeather army expressed his concerns, Lu Yizhao took out an invoice. The invoice stated that the Weiwu army would not deploy their forces and was worth 2 million notes. This was all of the Weiwu army's savings that Lu Yizhao had saved from the Qingxi army. The leader of the Blackfeather army only trusted Weiwu army after this. After that, he thought about it. The Weiwu army was very ambitious. They had already started to brand themselves as honest and trustworthy. Would they continue to cooperate with the bookmakers in the gambling dens? Then, after the Weiwu army bought 300 pigs and over 3,000 bottles of alcohol from Yunnan City, the leader of the Blackfeather army asked his friend to bet another 5 million. The Weiwu army had sent their subordinate to incite them. Evidently, they wanted to celebrate their victory and reward their army. This was a good opportunity for the Blackfeather army. Should they seize this chance to enter the mountains? The leader of the Blackfeather army thought of this idea, but immediately dismissed the thought. Are you sure that you will be able to find them if you enter the mountains? How would they be able to find such passive warriors like them? At first, Lu Shu wanted Lu Yizhao to find the aristocrats, as if he was able to work together with the aristocrats, they might be able to kill the Blackfeather army in the north region. The Weiwu army was originally from the north region. The Blackfeather army was their enemy. But the aristocrats were determined to leave the Weiwu army aside. Thus, they immediately rejected the Weiwu army. This made Lu Shu angry. If you were not willing to do business with me, that meant that you looked down on me. Thus, he made a deal with the Blackfeather army. Lu Shu was serious in his business. In the past, when he was earning distress points, he had always focused on sustainable development. He would do the same now. He might be stuck in this world for some time. Money could be easily earned if trust had been established, right? Who knows? Lu Shu might be able to bring back many local specialties, such as magical stones, armor, weapons, and so on. But in this war, would the Weiwu army really stay in Qinglu Mountain and not deploy their troops? Impossible. The gambling dens bet on whether the Weiwu army would deploy their forces and cooperate with the aristocrats in secret. The latter clause was more important. As long as the Weiwu army did not fight the Blackfeather army, it would not be considered a secret collaboration. Thus, the Weiwu army could fight the aristocrats brazenly. But the Weiwu army and the aristocrats shared the north region. If they brazenly fought the aristocrats and were questioned by the Lord of Heaven, what would they do? Thus, a group of bandits called Escape Poverty and Make a Fortune suddenly appeared north of Weibei Pass. They attacked the supplies and rations that the aristocrats possessed from all directions. They were rampant and the aristocrat armies all suffered heavy losses. When this group of bandits appeared, the aristocrats were speechless. Of course, they knew that this was the Weiwu army. But they did not have the Weiwu army armor. The aristocrats were not able to capture them either. Thus, they did not have any evidence. Furthermore, these bandits all concealed their faces. Their aim was only the supplies and rations. They did not do anything else. The first time the bandits attacked, they bumped into the group led by Li Haitan and Lu Yizhao, whose faces had been concealed. When the commander of the aristocrat army saw them, he panicked. "You Weiwu army soldiers." Before he could finish speaking, Li Haitan panicked as well. "Don't tarnish our reputation. We are bandits. Our ideal is to become bandits. If you destroy our ideal, we will attack." The commander was speechless. This piece of information was relayed to the palace. Many people knew that there was an internal battle between the Weiwu army and the aristocrats, but they did not have any evidence. After all, this had nothing to do with their bets. No one paid much attention. But the people in the palace all sighed with emotion. The fight between the North region and the West region was far too exciting. As they fought, even a group of bandits called Escape Poverty and Make a Fortune had made a move. How mysterious. Could the Weiwu army be more decent? Escape poverty and make a fortune? Were you serious? Fine. This time, the entire universe knew that the Weiwu army loved money. Lu Shu felt that they had even given up on the slogan of the Azure Dragon Village. What could they do? In this harsh environment, the aristocrat army had reached Weibei Pass. But this process made them realize that the Black Feather army was not weak. They just did not know what to do against the Weiwu army. Only the heavens knew how the Weiwu army became this strong. The aristocrats felt as if they were suffocating. Once this war was over, they would go to the Lord of Heaven and report the Weiwu army. They had caused a mess and affected the war experience. Lu Shu observed the battle in the distance from the mountain. He thought about it and said, although we have changed our slogan to escape poverty and make a fortune, it's hard to ensure that Wen Zaifu will not look into this. We have to think of a retreat route for the Weiwu army. Zhang Weiyu was speechless. It's rare that even you know how stupid this plan is. Lu Shu said, rapid and substantial changes happen during war. Which leader is certain that their strategy is definitely correct? But others will change once they know their mistake. What about you? Let go of me. From Zhang Weiyu's distress, plus 666. Lu Shu thought about it and said, store the army provisions and valuable items. If this war ends before the sword hut selection, we will have to leave King Lu Mountain. Of course, if the sword hut selection happened before that, it will not be a problem. They will not dare to provoke someone from the sword hut. If the sword hut selection has not started by the time the war ends, where will we go? Lu Xiaoyu asked curiously. Rations are not a problem now. We have enough to eat for 5 years. Lu Shu was shocked. Did we steal so many? Lu Xiaoyu silently nodded her head. The aristocrat army has started to live a frugal lifestyle since last week. If the war ends before the sword hut selection, we will fight our way to the west region and come back when the sword hut selection begins, said Lu Shu calmly. No one expected that the Weiwu army had started to make plans for their counterattack. They had committed too many sins. It seemed as if the north region could no longer take it. Chapter 943, Lu family from Luli Lane. The palace had never paid attention to an army with 5,000 people. Those in the palace were aloof. The aristocrats had distanced themselves from the war a long time ago. Many geniuses flourished in the palace. This caused the palace to become a utopia, independent of the 4 regions. But now, not only was their attention on the Weiwu army, they paid attention to their new commander, Lu Shu. Lu was a common surname. There was also the book of family names in this world, but the first line was different. The most common surnames were Liu, Qian, Sun, and Li. As the name of Lu Shu and the Weiwu army spread, a few aristocrats with the surname Lu started to thoroughly investigate their family history. They wanted to see whether this young man was part of their family branch. The rich and influential aristocrat families had been towering in the universe for thousands of years. Their influence spread far and wide. Other than the descendants, no one particularly cared about the rest of their family branch. After all, the classes had been fixed. Over the past 1,000 years, there were very few cases where peasants became aristocrats. But this time, the Weiwu army was different. Many aristocrats even felt that the leader of the Weiwu army would be able to rise among the chaos. It was not impossible for him to become an aristocrat. Thus, everyone started to investigate their family history and see whether he was in the records. Every year, the family branches would report their family history to the main branch so that they would be able to support their descendants, or lend their fame. But even then, there would be family branches that were gradually forgotten. The main family branch did not care about this, as they would always be the top. But now, it was different. If they would confirm that he was a member of their family branch, they would be able to benefit. He would be of assistance to the main branch. After all the Lu families sprang into action, they realized that they could not find a person called Lu Shu. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. But at that moment, the Lu family from Luli Lane in the palace suddenly announced that Lu Shu was part of their family branch. When this piece of news started to spread, the Weiwu army and Lu Shu, who were not as popular in terms of bets, once again became the topic of discussion. Are you sure? Did the Lu family from Luli Lane say that? They're not lying. I didn't expect that the new commander of the Weiwu army was from their family. The Lu family from Luli Lane is an established family. It is normal if a member from the family branch has suddenly risen to power. No wonder Lu Shu is so daring. So he had backup. It was as if no one thought that the Lu family from Luli Lane was adding on to the situation. They simply admired Lu Shu. Even Zhao Shuai was stunned when he heard about this. No wonder he did not accept our recruitment offer. He is daring because he has sufficient backup. When Zhao Shuai had gone to send Lu Shu a letter, Lu Shu had rejected. Back then, Zhao Shuai had good intentions. Everyone knew that the Weiwu army had been making bold moves recently. Once the war was over, the aristocrats from North region would gather and attack them. They would be very passive then. Thus, the Song family offered them an attractive deal. On one hand, they wanted to lend assistance to the Weiwu army in the future. On the other hand, since they were working together, they wanted to give Lu Shu some protection. The aristocrat of the Song family treasured him. But Lu Shu did not accept the deal. At first, Song Ji could not understand the reason. But now, he understood. Lu Shu could act as he wanted with the Lu family from Luli Lane behind him. Thus, the reason behind why the Weiwu army was so brave, arrogant, and able to rise up was all because of the Lu family. It was as if everything had happened naturally. But they did not know that Lu Shu did not know the Lu family from Luli Lane. He dared to do all these with the Weiwu army because he was impressive. The news from the Lu family did not spread outwards quickly. At least, there were no effects on the battlefield. Lu Shu was still thinking about how to avoid paying bills for all of the Black Feather Army's actions. He had decided to observe the battlefield. As long as the Black Feather Army could drag the battle for long enough for the Sword Hut selections to begin, and Lu Shu could enter the Sword Hut, no one would dare to provoke the Weiwu army. Thus, he hoped that the Black Feather Army would be able to endure. It would benefit him as well. Thus, Lu Shu initiated an internal meeting to discuss whether they wanted to use the escape poverty and make a fortune bandits to attack the aristocrat armies. Zhang Weiyu went crazy. He had endured for many years, but this was his first time seeing a bandit initiate a meeting to talk about military events. The problem was not whether they were strong enough. Even if the bandits were strong, they still had to consider the consequences of fighting an army, right? But Lu Shu did not care so much. I am very worried that if we do not help them, the Black Feather Army would not be able to endure. Zhang Weiyu laughed coldly. You underestimate the Black Feather Army. I am not overly praising them. Although the aristocrats are waiting at ease for the fatigued Black Feather Army, and the Black Feather Army has participated in the war for a few months, the elite are still the elite. If the aristocrat armies do not mobilize their top powers, then it would be very easy for the Black Feather Army to defeat the aristocrat armies. Thus, even if the Black Feather Army does not have the ability to continue heading north, it will not be a problem for them to defend Weibei Pass for another 6 months. Furthermore, the Black Feather Army forces in Liyang Pass have started to kill their enemies. The Black Feather Army forces here must protect the retreat route for the soldiers in the north. So I am very sure that there will not be any major changes to the battle before the Sword Hut selection. At that moment, Lu Yizhao suddenly walked in. Great Lord, the Black Feather Army has decided to retreat. Lu Shu silently looked at Zhang Weiyu. Zhang Weiyu was dumbfounded. There's something wrong. They retreated just like that? Zhang Weiyu could not understand. He had analyzed the situation in a rational manner. If he was the leader of an army, he would not give up on Weibei Pass easily. Once they gave up, the Black Feather Army forces in the Liyang Pass would be done for. In reality, Zhang Weiyu's analysis was correct. If he was the leader of the Black Feather Army, he might have been able to fight a better fight. But the Weiwu Army's confusing operations caused this battle to develop in an unpredictable manner. This time, the Black Feather Army decided to retreat. The leader of the Black Feather Army did not think that they were not able to defeat the aristocrat armies. In reality, his analysis was the same as Zhang Weiyu's. He had a 90% possibility of defeating them. But the problem was, he could no longer wait. The leader of the Black Feather Army had bet everything in the gambling dens. In the beginning, he was certain that the Weiwu Army would not deploy their forces. But the escape poverty and make a fortune bandits made them worried. Thus, the leader of the Black Feather Army decided to stop waiting. He gave up on this game. Could he hide now? Could he leave now? Once the Black Feather Army retreated from Weibei Pass, the bets would end early as well. This was silent acknowledgement that the Weiwu Army did not deploy their forces. As for whether the Weiwu Army would deploy their soldiers in the future, this had nothing to do with this round of bets. Now, the leader of the Black Feather Army panicked. He had to leave as soon as possible. This was the first time in the history of the Luniverse that a battle had been influenced by gamblers. Chapter 944, Brother. The Black Feather Army was very busy. Since they had retreated, they had to leave without hesitation. This was what an elite army was supposed to do. They did not drag on. Thus, before the aristocrat armies could react, the Black Feather Army started to advance in the direction of Nanging City and Yunnan City overnight. The leader of the Black Feather Army was also worried that the aristocrat armies would catch up to them. Thus, during the day, they still acted as if they were ready to fight to their deaths. But at night, they made their escape. The moment the leader of the Black Feather Army stepped out of Weibei Pass, he felt refreshed. He happily looked up at the scouts from the gambling dens, who were hiding in the sky. He had won this bet. He had bet a total of 10 million notes, but received 23.91 million notes. He felt that he had never earned money so easily in his entire life. He would have to go back to the West region and receive his punishment from Duanmu Huangqi. He could no longer hold on to his position as leader of the Black Feather Army. But he had graduated from the Imperial College and had many connections. Thus, Duanmu Huangqi would not do much to him. Li Liang, the leader of the Black Feather Army, already planned to retire from his public duties and return to the palace as his house was there. Thus, this retreat made him feel as if he had been relieved of a heavy load. Li Liang rode his horse and advanced. After traveling for half a day, he suddenly turned around and looked at Weibei Pass, which was almost out of sight. He chuckled. If the two armies had not been pitted against each other, he would feel that the Weiwu Army was rather interesting. They might even become friends to drink and chat merrily with. Li Liang called the Weiwu Army the Monster Army in private. It was not because they were made up of monsters. It was because they were adept at causing evil. To be honest, Li Liang had fought battles for many years. Victory or defeat was a common thing for him. It was rather interesting that a monster army like the Weiwu Army had suddenly appeared. But all these had nothing to do with him now. Perhaps he would run into a commander called Lu Shu at the palace. He would invite him for a drink. Perhaps Lu Shu would no longer be a commander, but a leader. Perhaps he would become part of the nobility. These were all possible. But what did this have to do with Li Liang? He was about to become a rich man in the palace. But at that moment, there was rumble coming from Li Liang's left. It was as if there was an army chasing them. The next moment, Li Liang saw the flag that said, "Escape poverty and make a fortune." He gasped. What in the world? The Weiwu army was rushing over, as if they were not afraid of a large army. They seemed even faster than the Black Feather army. Li Liang shouted to his subordinates behind him, "Speed up." But the Weiwu army's overall strength was not something that the Black Feather army could deal with. The 5,000 people from the Weiwu army stopped in front of the 100,000 men-strong Black Feather army in no time. Lu Shu expressionlessly looked at Li Liang. Go back. Li Liang was confused. From Li Liang's distress, plus 666. He had taken great pains to bring the Black Feather army out, but now he had to go back? Li Liang was dumbstruck. He looked at Lu Shu. Are you crazy? You are an army from the North region, and yet you do things like this. We are not an army from the North region. Lu Shu gestured at the flag behind him. We are bandits. Escape poverty and make a fortune. The slogan of "Escape poverty and make a fortune" had spread through the palace. Needless to say, this slogan was very rare. The other slogans were threatening, like that of the Long Meng Army, the Red Flame Army, and the Black Feather Army. But now, they had made their private feelings into a slogan. But Lu Shu did not care. He felt that the slogan, "Escape poverty and make a fortune," had the flavor of ideals and dreams. He felt that being passionate was very egoistic. Read the next chapter on our VIPnovel.com. But Lu Shu had no choice either. Once the Black Feather army retreated, he would have to face the aristocrat armies, as well as the interrogation from the North region. How could he let this pass? What about the battle that everyone had decided to fight? Why did all of you secretly run away? No leaving. Whoever left first would have to fight him. Lu Shu thought he had overworked for the sake of the Weiwu army. He had even thought about this method. But he had no choice. He was being forced by life. The Black Feather army could not leave if the Weiwu army wanted to wait in safety until the sword hut selections began. In reality, Lu Shu did not know that the Lu family in Luli Lane had taken him under his wing. Of course, even if he knew, he would not have any feelings towards them. He knew clearly that he did not belong in this universe. He also knew that there was no such thing as unconditional love in this world. He did not want to become part of the Lu family from Luli Lane. He wanted to lead his own army and decide his own fate. Li Liang was silent. So the 5,000 of you want to block the Black Feather army? Are you thinking too much? No, Lu Shu smiled. We have no intention of fighting you now. But you will take about 1 month to return to the West region. Take a guess. How many of your soldiers are the Weiwu army able to kill in this period of time? Li Liang knew very clearly that with the Weiwu army's mobility, they did not have any good solutions if the Weiwu army chased and killed them from behind. In short, the Weiwu army was far too strong in terms of combat power. If he brought the army back in one piece, he could safely become a rich man. But if the army had not been able to advance north and had lost half of their men, it would be very difficult for him to do so. Li Liang had an impulse. He wanted to kill someone. Just 1 moment ago, he had felt that he could talk and drink with this young man. But this heroic ideal was about to be destroyed by reality. It was about to break into pieces. But Li Liang did not dare to move as he knew that there were a few rank 1 experts glaring ferociously at him. Those rank 1 experts were all silently protecting the young man. If he did not kill them, but instead angered this group of crazy people, it would not be considered a loss. In the moonlight, Li Liang considered his gains and losses. He unintentionally looked at the flag that said, "Escape poverty and make a fortune." Suddenly, he said, "If you let us leave, I will give you 3 million notes." Lu Shu paused for 2 seconds. Then, he said, "Brother." Li Liang was confused. From Li Liang's distress, plus 666. Fate was a mysterious thing. This was what Li Liang thought. Just one moment ago, he had wanted to make friends with Lu Shu. Now, not only had they become friends, they had become brothers. Li Liang had never imagined being brothers with someone in this way. So your slogan truly reflected the inner desires of the Weiwu army. Li Liang did not doubt that if he took out 5 million notes, Lu Shu would create an alliance with him. He was puzzled. So this kind of person led an army like the Weiwu army? But Lu Shu suddenly said, "Brother. There will be difficulties and obstacles on this journey. We will escort you there." Li Liang was speechless. What escort? Evidently, you did not want to stay in the North region. Chapter 945, 3 Rounds of Attack. Li Liang and Lu Shu discussed whether they should protect the Black Feather Army. According to Lu Shu, everyone was brothers. As brothers, they ought to protect each other as they might meet danger on their way. Li Liang, on the other hand, felt that the most dangerous aspect on their way back to the West region was none other than the Weiwu army. After a long pause, Li Liang said, "I suggest all of you to guard the Weibei Pass now so you can prevent the aristocrats from entering. After Wen Zaifu, your Lord of Heaven, completes his training, the Weiwu army will be credited with the name of killing the Black Feather Army." Lu Shu shook his head. No, the name is definitely not as important as protecting our brother." Lu Shu was laughing internally. Everyone knew how the army of the aristocrats viewed the Weiwu army. After the Black Feather Army left, the army of the aristocrats would probably target the Weiwu army immediately. Lu Shu would probably not give up on the idea of protecting them. Li Liang thought that Lu Shu was a man that would keep his word and therefore endured it as he wanted to return to the West region safely. However, something that angered Li Liang happened on the next day. As expected, the Weiwu army started to play tricks. In fact, Lu Shu, who was leading the Weiwu army, did not follow closely behind the Black Feather Army. Instead, he appeared occasionally. Then, when the Black Feather Army was caught off guard, Lu Shu suddenly infiltrated the Black Feather Army from the back with the Weiwu army. Li Liang's heart sank. Indeed, the Weiwu army attacked. The so-called Brotherhood was all fake. All fake. Meanwhile, at this moment, the chief officers of the gambling dens who were situated near the Black Feather Army exchanged gazes and passed the message back. The Song gambling den was the first to update the news. As the Black Feather Army was unable to match up to the Weiwu army, they retreated and the Weiwu army chased after them. A new bet was made. How many soldiers of the Weiwu army would die after infiltrating the Black Feather Army? It had been 1 month since the day where the palace bled. The gamblers and the aristocrats were willing to bet again. By right, the aristocrats received their pocket money every month. Therefore, the gambling dens thought that it was a time where everyone had money again. Therefore, Zhao Shuai discussed the matter with Lu Shu. Since the battle was ending, they had to find a way to earn some money. The Weiwu army had enough armor. However, the Song gambling den proposed another deal, to give Lu Shu 20% of the shares of one of the branches of the Song gambling den, as well as a huge manor that was worth millions of dollars. Lu Shu would decide on how to win this bet. Lu Shu was slightly worried. They had cheated the money of the gamblers in the palace last month, would they be so quick to jump back and start gambling again? Zhao Shuai told him that gamblers would not remember it and told him to rest assured. Lu Shu was fixed on heading to the palace. All right. He would do it. Meanwhile, the gamblers of the palace had learned their lesson. Everyone placed their bets on no deaths, and 1 to 100 deaths. Everyone felt that the Weiwu army was invincible and powerful. Moreover, the commander of the Weiwu army, Lu Shu, protected his soldiers well. Therefore, there should not be any casualties amongst the Weiwu army. However, what disappointed them was the fact that the earnings for no death was very low. Even if they won, they would not win much. Meanwhile, the gambling den was updating the battle situation based on real-time information. The Weiwu army had attacked the Black Feather army thrice. The gamblers in the palace smiled. The Weiwu army did not disappoint them indeed. Suddenly, all the gambling dens in the palace started a new bet. How many soldiers of the Black Feather army would die? It was the same bet as the Weiwu army in the past. However, the subject was on the Black Feather army instead. Everyone thought that since the Weiwu army had attacked 3 times, there would definitely be countless casualties. Therefore, a large sum of money went to this bet. When Lu Shu led the Weiwu army to attack the Black Feather army again, all of the soldiers of the Black Feather army, including Li Liang, stood rooted to the ground in shock as they watched the Weiwu army leave. The chief officers of the gambling dens reported the live situation. There was 0 deaths from the Weiwu army. When this news arrived at the palace, the gamblers rejoiced. It was equivalent to giving them money. None of the soldiers in the Weiwu army died. At this moment, many aristocrats started praising the Weiwu army. The spirit of the Weiwu army is commendable. It has been a long time since there was a powerful army like the Weiwu army in the universe. Although the number of soldiers are quite little, they are not weak at all. Indeed, the commander of the Weiwu army is also a talented person. If he ever visits the palace, we have to treat him beer. I wonder how many casualties are there for the Black Feather army. At this moment, the number of casualties of the Black Feather army was updated. Everyone swarmed into the gambling den. How many soldiers of the Black Feather army died? Meanwhile, the people at the outer circle realized that something was amiss. The people in the inner circle froze. Someone asked, "What happened?" Someone turned and mumbled, "How is this possible?" None of the soldiers of the Black Feather army died. Everyone was stunned. They were just commenting about how powerful the Weiwu army was earlier on, as they have attacked the Black Feather army thrice. In the end, none of the soldiers from the Black Feather army died. If this happened to other armies, it would have been a bloodbath. Why did the Weiwu army act as though they were just fooling around? So the Weiwu army attacked 3 times for fun? What the f***ck? Earlier on, people offered to treat Lu Shu to drinks when he arrived at the palace. Now, everyone was wondering if Lu Shu still dared to go to the palace. If he did, they would definitely gang up and kill him. At this moment, the Black Feather army was also confused. Initially, they panicked when the Weiwu army attacked. However, after the Weiwu army arrived, everyone was shouting for people to give way. Before Lu Shu led the army for the attack, he was extremely worried that Li Haitan could not control his attack and would accidentally kill others. After all, nobody could read Li Haitan's mind. Therefore, Lu Shu specially informed Li Haitan, "Do not kill anyone, they paid us." Li Haitan replied, "Got it." Therefore, during these 3 attacks, Li Haitan did not kill anyone. When the Weiwu army attacked, Li Liang knew what had happened when he heard that nobody died. Li Liang suddenly felt emotional. The Weiwu army earned money so easily. Why didn't he think of earning money with this method? However, the Weiwu army had their speciality when making money. If they did not become famous after winning despite being a weak team, none of the aristocrats and the bosses of the gambling dens would know who they were. Therefore, money could not be made by just any Tom, Dick, or Harry.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty. Man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens to tell us things that we beg to know. Like what did the